General Hodges, good to see you again on TV Rain. Thank you and welcome to the show. First of all, I would like to ask you about the list of targets that, as we understand, Ukraine has delivered to the US. And they are expecting a green light for targeting the Russian territory, the objects at the Russian territory. Do you think that they will actually get this green light?
I certainly hope so. For me, it's shameful that we're even having to go through this process. The United States should not be putting any restrictions on how Ukraine uses the weapons that we've provided, nor should the UK or Germany or anyone else. And that would not be the case if my government had made it clear that we wanted Ukraine to actually win this war, because it's in our interest. If they would do that, then we wouldn't even be having this particular conversation. Still, I imagine that there will be some success on getting at least some of these targets approved in order to protect innocent Ukrainian civilians.
What kind of targets do you think would be approved?
Well, certainly, I think any airfield from which Russian attacks are originating, where they drop glide bombs or other type missiles against civilian infrastructure, those should be approved. And frankly, anywhere else inside Russian territory from which Russian artillery and rocket launchers and drone operators are attacking Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. I think that we should be much more helpful in going after these targets than we have been so far.
General, I was wondering, through all this time of the big war in Ukraine, I was wondering, maybe they know something in Washington, D.C. They have, I don't know, acknowledgement of the reaction. They are expecting something from Putin, and that's why they're not acting like Ukraine is expecting them to. So but maybe there is something in particular that Biden administration has as an information, or they're just scared.
I believe that the administration, which is loaded with good, intelligent, industrious, patriotic people, they have an excessive fear that Russia might use a nuclear weapon, that Russia might escalate somehow. I know that there are people that speculate, there must be some secret agreement or something going on. I don't know that. But what I do know is what I hear the administration say and how they talk about wanting to avoid escalation and the very restrictive language when they describe, well, Ukraine doesn't need this particular weapon because of they're in the defense. These are people that are talking that have no understanding of warfare or what is required to help Ukraine actually defend itself. So I don't think that there's some conspiracy or secret agreement. Although certainly Russia would love that. They would like to have some kind of the Kremlin would love to have a deal. And there, unfortunately, are some people in Washington and Berlin and London that would support something like that. I think, though, it really boils down to the administration has excessive fear that the Kremlin might try to escalate. And so we have been deterring ourselves from the very beginning. And I think the fact that Ukrainian forces now are in week 4 inside the Kursk Oblast and other places, and Russia has not used a nuclear weapon, Russia has not retaliated in any way other than what they have already been doing, gives me even more confidence that these are empty threats. I would also say, I think one other thing is that there is also, I think, excessive fear in Washington that if Ukraine achieves great success, that somehow this might lead to a collapse of the Putin regime, of the government. And I think they are very concerned about that. And I think we should not be concerned about it, but we should plan for the possible implications of it.
You have mentioned Kursk Oblast, obviously. This is one of the biggest successes of Ukrainian army. But where is it going, in your opinion, and what would be the result globally?
Yeah, it's a great question. As I look at it, of course, the general staff and the government have been very disciplined about sharing information. We don't know all the objectives, nor should we know. I'm not entitled to know all that. So I have to speculate a little bit about what they hope to achieve. How long they stay there, of course, depends on what is the purpose. What are they there for? That will determine as well as the Russian reaction. But what I see from this Kursk counteroffensive is a very successful effort to change the narrative about the inevitability of Russian success. It also has changed the momentum of the conflict, and obviously, it's provided a psychological boost for Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian population, and for others who, like me, support Ukraine and want to see Ukraine successful in this conflict. On a practical level, they have created a real problem for the Kremlin, I believe. The Kremlin has to decide: do you just let this salient or bridgehead that Ukrainians have created inside Russia? Do you just let it sit there, or do you find means to eliminate it, but also continue operations in against Pokrovsk, for example? These are all connected. I think that one of the objectives for the Ukrainian side was to force Russia to reduce the force it's using in the east to respond to this bridgehead in the Kursk Oblast. So far, it doesn't look like that is happening yet, but I think it would be too early to say that it's not going to happen. I think that the Ukrainian General Staff correctly decided that they could accept risk in the Pokrovsk area in order to launch this counteroffensive. The Russians, they captured Avdiivka back in February, and it's about 50 kilometers from Avdiivka to Pokrovsk. So in 6 months, with the loss of tens of thousands of Russian troops, Russia is slowly inching its way towards Pokrovsk. And I think they will try to make a big deal out of it. I think from the Ukrainian side, this is a city that is no longer usable as a logistics hub. Most of the people have already left. And so I think the Ukrainians have made the correct decision to slowly withdraw from here, because it's clear that Russia does not have the ability to overwhelm all of Ukrainian defenses in the east and exploit it. They can only keep going very slowly like they are.
But General, we can hear and see some criticism towards Zelensky and Ukrainian army saying, you're attacking Russian territory, you're not defending your own Pokrovsk, and you're losing your people in Kursk region, while maybe it would be smarter to let these people defending their own land. What would you answer to this criticism?
I would say that we know from thousands of years of military history that the best defense is a good offense, and that by regaining the momentum, by changing the problems for your enemy, is the best way to defend your territory. Look, exactly as President Zelensky said, this operation in Kursk has created a buffer that has pushed back Russians from being able to attack Sumy, for example, to deny Russia the ability to launch attacks from just across the border. So this does, in fact, help defend Ukraine. And it also will enable Ukraine to move forward with its own long-range systems that can reach further, which is especially important since the United States continues to restrict long-range weapons from being used inside Russia. Look, there is a risk here, but if you think about every conflict in history, there has always been a point where commander had to accept risk in one place in order to achieve a greater success in another place. This is classical military doctrine, and I think that what Ukraine is achieving now, the results are not going to be immediately apparent, but I have great confidence in what the General Staff is doing here.
Last thing I would like to ask you about, General, is your prospect, your forecast on the situation on the front in Ukraine. We can see that Belgorod region is also under fire from time to time. It's getting more intense, but no one can actually understand, is it going to be the same as in Kursk, or it's just small groups of military personnel from Ukraine coming, going, and doing things like just, that are not changing the situation on the ground globally. What is the main target for Ukraine in the future? How would the situation develop in coming months, in your opinion?
So part of this depends on whether or not the United States and UK and Germany will continue providing the amount of capabilities as quickly as we should. Obviously, if there's a failure in Ukraine, it's because we in the West have failed. This includes, of course, providing air and missile defense, as well as helping Ukraine be able to strike those targets. We talk about it's better to kill the archer than to try and intercept all of the arrows. So that's why if you can destroy the place from which Russia's attacks are originating, that's much more effective than trying to knock down the 100, 150 missiles and drones that are coming in. This operation in Kursk is only a part of what's going on, and this is what's so impressive to me about what the General Staff is doing. They continue to strike oil and gas infrastructure throughout Russia, which creates obviously a huge problem for the Kremlin economically as well as psychologically. They are continuing to isolate Crimea. Last week they destroyed the last ferry that can move rail cars across Azov, the Kerch Strait, from mainland Russia into Crimea.
We can say that Russia actually is looking forward to the elections in the U.S., right? To the Kremlin, it is a very important timeline. They are looking forward to the changes in the United States.
Yeah, I think that Putin would much rather see Donald Trump as the president than Kamala Harris. And of course, I would be crazy to try and predict an American election. I do feel more confident that if Kamala Harris is elected as our president, that support for Ukraine will continue strong and probably even improve. I would certainly hope. Whereas with Trump, I'm just less certain because he is so unpredictable and the things he says, it's difficult to know exactly what he is thinking. And of course, it would depend a little bit on who he might have in his administration. But aside from the American election, Europe, they have to know and they have to act, because if the United States fails and allows Ukraine to fail, then Europe is going to pay the biggest price, especially countries like Germany and others, where there will be millions more Ukrainian refugees trying to get away from the Red Army, the continued disruption of food and energy coming out of Ukraine, the continued disruption to European security and prosperity is only bad news for the rest of Europe. So our European allies are going to have to step up, regardless of whether or not the United States does everything that we should do.
Okay, thank you so much for your view and for your prospects, and I hope to see you again soon.
I would like that. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the privilege.
Sure.